work with is the park rental program. And as Colette said, worked to develop the Art in the Park Fund.
Jessica, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jessica Watson. I work for Cultural Services. I'll be the administrator of the grant. So you'll probably talk to me about your contract and payments and all those fun things. Or if you have any questions about like the application for either of the grants, and or if you need anything available in a different way for accessibility reasons.
Awesome. Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Jessica. Hi, everyone. For folks new, I'm Colette Ramirez. Welcome to our grants info session. This is the first year that we are releasing our Downtown Program Fund grant and our Art in the Parks Fund grant at the same time. And this change is allowing us to align with kind of our broader reservation systems for parks and open space and for the Farmers Market Pavilion, which is a hot commodity for the Downtown Program Fund. Thank you for taking the time. Some of you might be at your lunch. We appreciate you coming here. We will have another workshop session on Monday, October 28th from 4 to 5:30 p.m. in the Eugene Public Library. In which room, Jessica?
The Sunstone Room, which is on the 3rd floor of the library.
So if you will have further, if you have further questions or need help with your application, we'll be available then as well. So for us, we've had multiple successful seasons of the Downtown Program Fund grant and 2 seasons of the Art in the Parks Fund grant. And they really have become cornerstones of programming, activation, vibrancy, community building for our city. And community-driven events and programming we feel really are needed now more than ever to build community, for people to share their stories, their experiences, and really fulfill the vision of our just growing and increasingly diverse community. And then we just recognize the importance of these events in the park system and downtown, and want to continue to support those. And so we are here, this team really, we're the technical team. We have 2 other staff actually who aren't able to be here that are also technical support. We have David Dickinson, who helps with the downtown activity zone permits, and then Josiah Sheehan, who helps with operations in the parks. But we are here to support you all, recognizing that, you know, once you get a grant, then you have to apply for permits, which we'll get into, and kind of figure out the different nuts and bolts of putting on an event. And we want you to be successful. And for us, we believe as public stewards, it is our job to uplift and honor the diversity of cultural heritages by creating more resources, access to resources. And like I said, we try to create opportunities to minimize the barriers to activation. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. Because there are 2 grants, I'm going to really focus on one, and I'll kind of hop back a little bit back and forth. So we have the Art in the Parks, which is really about activating the park system. So events at Alton Baker, but also events throughout the park system. And then our Downtown Program Fund really is around events in the downtown core. So hold on, I got to do a little, Jessica and Molly, will you help me? I have to minimize my video screen as I go ahead and share my notes. So will you help me kind of manage if folks have questions or comments, and feel free to just hop in, interrupt me. Molly, you have your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to specify, depending on, for people who are here, which fund you're interested in, is that the downtown park blocks is included in the downtown fund, and not in the Art in the Park Fund, as the downtown manages that park space. So just for people to have that in mind when you're thinking about this, depending on where you want to host your event.
Awesome. Thanks, Molly. Okay, so let me go ahead and I'm going to share my screen. One sec. I'm gonna minimize something. Let's share that. All right, are you seeing our website and the art in the parks?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so for us, the deadline for submission for both Art in the Parks and Downtown Program Fund is noon on November 5th. So there's still a couple of weeks. One thing to note is the Art in the Parks Fund, we split it out into a 2,500 for small scale events and up to 5,000 for large scale events, whereas the Downtown Program Fund is up to 5,000. In the future, we'll probably split them out to be the same. It just kind of can help you figure out the scaling of your event. So for the goals for Art in the Parks, steward vibrant, inspiring places that foster personal, community, and environmental well-being, cultivate a sense of belonging in the park system and pride in historically underrepresented groups such as Eugene's BIPOC and LGBTQIA+ population, low-income communities, people with disabilities, unhoused individuals, youth, and seniors, nurture relationships and promote cultural exchange through arts experiences that honor and celebrate diversity while striving to inspire empathy, understanding, dialogue, wonder, and curiosity. And for Art in the Parks, fun projects that support both large celebrations in Alton Baker Park and smaller events in the City of Eugene parks. So for the Art in the Parks Fund, there is less money that we're going to be giving out this year because last year we funded some of the larger events. They had the ability to apply for 2 years of funding. As we think about how can we minimize kind of paperwork, we thought some of these large events that have been going for 20 years, 15 years, if they know they're going to do it, they were able to apply and get funded. And so that means the amount we're giving out is around 30,000 instead of 45,000 because we've already funded approximately 15,000 of large scale events. And so that'll just be something we consider. And then the Downtown Program Fund looks like we're actually going to be increasing the fund. We recently have been approved for larger funds. So I'm still not certain, but it looks like it's upwards of $50,000 for the Downtown Program Fund this year, which is really exciting. So as I hop in to the Downtown Program Fund, as we look at the goals, it really draw people economic vitality and a sense of place and safety to the downtown core through the activation of outdoor spaces with arts and cultural events and or installations. And outdoor spaces, we also include the farmers market and help our regional artists and arts organizations to thrive, recognizing that downtown really is the cultural center of our community. And there's a lot of arts organizations and that do partake in the Downtown Program Fund. And then for the most part, they're similar fun. And the last one is fun projects at the Farmers Market Pavilion and Plaza and other public spaces. And these goals are important because as we get into the application and the criteria, one of the beefiest questions is how does your project align with the goals of these projects? And so just as you're thinking about the application, really tying into these goals is going to be important and something that the selection committee will look at. So I'm going to continue to go through, I'm going to go back to Art in the Parks and I'm going to go through each tab. Feel free to follow along on your own as well. So here we are, info session right now, in-person work session. Within a couple days, we will upload a budget video. We're not going to get into the budget so much today unless you all have specific questions, but the in-person work session is a great place if you have budget questions, or you can ask me and Jessica specifically if you have budget questions and how to fill that out. Like I said, there'll be a tutorial video coming out. So there's the apply online. Like I said, submissions due at noon. The funding, this describes the Art in the Parks. The DPF one also has, wait, where did I go? Hold on. I don't know if the DPF has the funding so much here because it's not That's right, because it's up to 5,000. So this is a little more detailed. And how you know if you're a small scale or a large scale event is if you need a fire operational permit. So you will need to look into this if you need that. Usually there's a little bit of a note. Where am I? Hold on, let me get back. For funding is required when the number of tables or booths exceed 10. Cooking is involved typically if you have more than 1,000 people. So there's different kind of triggers to the fire operational permit, and you'll just need to kind of look if you think that is what you are going to need. And we're happy today, if you have some questions about your event, we can kind of help talk through that. Molly, Jessica, do you have anything about the fire operational permit that I didn't cover or that might be helpful? I know it's kind of complicated.
When in doubt, ask a question. You can actually call them or email them and ask them, here's what I'm thinking. Would this trigger a permit?
They're really helpful.
Yeah, and I would just say, as event organizers, that there's permits that an event organizer might need to obtain or not obtain related to fire safety. But if you have vendors there, you may not need a permit for the event itself, but your vendors may have permit needs that they need to be in compliance with. So for example, if you had a food truck there, and maybe it doesn't require a fire permit for you as the event organizer, food trucks are required to have a certain ventilation system that has to be approved by the fire department. And so those are some things that will help kind of explain. But to Jessica's point, I would suggest anybody who is going to be hosting an event to run it through the fire marshal's office to get that you're okay, you don't need a permit, or you do need a permit. Because ultimately, if they come out the day of, they can shut down an event if it is out of accordance with a city code.
And I haven't seen that happen in a very long time, and they're really helpful and great to work with.
Yes, they absolutely are. I would agree.
Yeah. Applicant eligibility, for us, the grants are open to all organizations, individuals headquartered here. The events have to take place between April 1st and October 31st. If you apply for an event outside that range, your application will be disqualified. And some of that is just helping us make sure we get all of our ducks in a row and get the meetings and contracts agreements done in time. If it's before April 1st, it can be challenging for us to get the money and all the things and reservations needed. The program should be made as accessible as possible. So if the event is not free to attend, then a portion of tickets must be offered for free on a sliding scale, recognizing that some people want to have ticketed events. However, I have seen the committees, now that I've led multiple grant review committees, just a heads up, they tend to like to support the free events more that I've seen. And we've reminded them, folks can have ticketed events, they need to make it free. So that's just something to consider. If you have a ticketed event, really be thoughtful and articulate how you're going to make this accessible to the community. That you must also provide a one-to-one cash, in-kind, and or volunteer time match for the project that equals the amount of your grant award. So if we give you $2,000, you have to contribute at least $2,000. And it can be all in cash. Let's say you're like, Selco sponsored me for $2,000. It's like, sweet, you got that. But if you're like, I got $500 from Selco, but I have 10 volunteers at, 33, per hour, and they're working 10 hours, then you're getting upwards of like $3,000, right? And so you just have to kind of do the math and think through it as you fill out the budget. And you'll see once we do the budget video and you get into the budget, kind of how that can play out. You may submit for as many as two programs, but you are only eligible to receive funding for one. And there can't be any open litigation or claim. Previously funded programs are eligible to reapply, but not until their events happened and they've submitted their final documentation, their final report. And as a City of Eugene employee, if there's any folks that are trying to apply, you're not eligible to apply for this grant. You can be involved with an organization that applies, but you can't be one of the leads or be on the application. And like Molly said, events in the park blocks are not eligible for this grant, but are eligible for the Downtown Program Fund grant. And I don't think there really are any differences. We talked about the insurance in the downtown activity zone permit, but that's required also in art in the park. So I'll just talk about the insurance. We require $2 million general liability insurance, and then 3 million aggregate. And we have a page to learn about the insurance requirements that goes into it. What most people do for your event, unless you are like a nonprofit organization or you have your own commercial general liability insurance, a lot of folks will go online and you'll see that there's a list of potential online event resources, and you have to go to these and enter in kind of the details of your event, day, location, number of people, what you're going to have, and get a quote, and you can get event insurance for that. And you can use money from your grant for that. So as you're developing your budget, you're going to want to put a line item, if you do not have the general liability insurance coverage per occurrence and 3,000 aggregate, then you will need to budget money. And so you'll need to go in and do kind of a pretend quote to get a sense of how much are you going to have to pay for that. Anything to add, Molly, Jessica?
Yeah, I would just add a little bit more context to the insurance as it applies, like Colette said, to the downtown and the art in the park. But the minimum limits are not numbers that the city comes up with. They are developed of tort claims, which is the maximum amount that someone could sue a public entity for. So the City of Eugene is a public entity. And the reason that event organizers need to have insurance is you are the party putting on the event. And so we want to make sure you're insured should something happen and somebody files litigation. And so this is a way of making sure you're protected. And additionally, because the city is self-insured, and so we don't have a bank of money to pay out claims for community organized events. And so it is a way to protect you in the event something happens, which could, even if you plan for everything, something still could happen. So that's why the limits are the limits and why the city requires it.
That's great. Thank you, Molly, so much for that context. Feel free to, if you all have questions, raise your hand if you have any questions as we go. Let's see. So we talked about eligibility requirements, insurance application. So in this application process, I recommend you pulling up this list of application questions PDF and entering in these questions into your own document, kind of wordsmithing them, working them out before you get into the actual application. So, it's split up into how it's going to be, all the information you're going to provide. Here are the questions. Please describe your proposed event or art installation. What will the public experience, and what will success for the program look like? How does your project meet the goals of DPF or Arts in the Parks? Tell us about your organization, yourself as a cultural producer. What past experience do you have? Are there other partners involved? Who is your target audience, and what is your personal relationship with that audience? How will the project demonstrate community engagement with them? How will you make your project accessible, safe, and welcoming for attendees? So that's DPF. Art in the Parks is very similar. There's just a few other just little kind of nuances. Yeah, so we have the goals of the Art in the Parks Fund. I think one thing that's important, then we get into kind of the budget. And then there's optional supplementary materials. I really encourage you to include images, videos, letters of support, social media links. Because if you just do the application, the committee wants to get a sense of like, what are they creating? What does it look like? What does it feel like? You can do that with your words, but having the visuals really does help the selection committee get a sense. It's almost like you're drawing the picture for what you're creating. So that will be really helpful.
And just to clarify on the selection committee, Colette, myself, Jessica, and Molly, we're not on the selection committee. We do not vote in which organizations get the grants. So even if we know you really well, these might be strangers to you. So those supporting documents help in case someone is not familiar with you or your organization.
Thanks, Jessica, for that. The selection committee will be made of, we're striving to get 5 kind of partners from outside of the city of Eugene who have experience running events, being sound, running nonprofits, folks who really care about creating vibrant places for our community. So as you think about those questions, we're really the selection criteria and how the committee is going to be thinking about it is kind of split into these 4 areas: the purpose, the applicant capacity, community impact, and budget. So purpose, to what extent will programming draw people, create a vibe, and then meet those goals like I talked about in the beginning, and meet the mission of cultural services and parks and open space for Art in the Parks. And there's a link and we list out what those are. And then for us, and what the committee wants to see is, can you actually do this? Do you have experience producing events? If you've never done it and you're like, I'm going to throw a $30,000 event and bring 15,000 people, the committee might be like, oh, I'm not sure if they can actually pull this off. And so we really want to see, what kind of experience you have producing similar programming. And then how does the project involve and contribute to the community you serve? And is the programming accessible and welcoming for community members? And then, like I talked about earlier, if it's not free, how are you supporting and making it accessible? And then for the budget, we don't require, this is not a grant that requires kind of a final budget showing your actuals, but this kind of goes also into applicant capacity, is that we want to make sure that, and the committee will ask, does this seem accurate? Does this seem about right with the budget, and look like folks were thoughtful, that they really took the time to articulate with the dollars the full scope of the program. Anything to add here, Molly or Jessica?
The only thing I wanted to add is if you are new to creating events in public spaces, that doesn't mean you're not eligible, but just go for a smaller event. And actually, I've noticed that committees actually like those smaller events where it's for $500 or something smaller so that they can fund more events. So it's not always the best strategy to go for the highest number just because you can.
Thanks, Jessica. Then we line out our expectations and support. We do expect the applicant and awardee to be the lead in the marketing. Often people will be like, well, are you marketing it? And we do market it on our website. will share social media, but it's not our event. We are the sponsor of the event. And so that responsibility falls on the awardee because it's your event. We're just trying to help you support it. And we'll, like I said, put on our calendar, feature it in some of our socials, but we're not going to be the lead on the marketing. We will send, if you get awarded, a whole marketing toolkit, things to consider, things to think about if you're not familiar with marketing event. And that could be helpful. If you're a bigger event, you want to think about putting some money towards marketing your event, like building that into the budget. That's an important piece. And then we do like to have our logo and our written name, and program information as a sponsor. We require a final report with images. And then an important thing, we talked about the insurance, but is also the permits. We've alluded to that. The permits kind of depend on where your event's happening and the scope of the event. So if you're going to be downtown, the first step for all of these is you submit an event inquiry form, which goes to, and this will all be, if you get awarded, we'll give you all this information. We'll go into more detail, but you submit an event inquiry form, goes to folks who have permits, and then we can help you determine how many permits you need. And so as you're building your budget, if you have questions and you've never done this and you're like, I want to hold a dance event in Kesey Square. I think we're going to have 250 people. But I want all the dance organizations from Eugene to come and pop up, and you're going to have like 10 tents. You'd need a fire marshal permit, and we can help you determine that as you're building your budget. Feel free to call us or come to that workshop. And then for us, the support is around handing out funds. We provide an initial consultation meeting, Molly and I for Art in the Parks, David Dickinson for the DAS, to help you understand what kind of permits you need, marketing toolkit. We also, this is a key thing, we have access to available city equipment for loan. Some organizations who don't do events often don't have tables, chairs, canopies, A-frames. We have all of that, and there will be a link if you get awarded to our the events that you're able to borrow. So we'll continue to support you in that way. Let's see if I missed anything from expectations and support. And then I think a support from Parks and Open Spaces. This is important to note for Art in the Parks, as we were talking about the permits. Parks and Open Spaces reserves a $15,000 permit fund for park rental fee waivers, which is great. And so if the total park rental fees for all grantees is over 15,000, the amount of those fees waived per event will kind of determine after. If it's like 17,000 is the amount of permit fees, you won't get the full amount waived, but you'll get a lot. And then this also goes for the Farmers Market Pavilion as well. We waive, we're still determining how much, but some of those fees for the rental of that space. I'm going to go back up. Molly, do you want to talk about eligible parks and the park rental process for Art in the Parks?
Sure. So what is listed on the screen right now are some of our parks that have more of the amenities that an event organizer might be looking for. But basically all of our parks, with the exception of the downtown park blocks, because that is operated by the downtown team, are eligible in some context. So there's a list that you can check on Civic Rec and kind of go through the parks and see what their amenities are. But things to think about is, if a park doesn't have a restroom already there, then an event organizer is going to need to think about, if I'm having a community event, I'm going to need to have a restroom there. And that's something to consider. One of the reasons like this fund exists is that those are dollars that can go towards that. So I would say look at this list first. This is just to be informational on which has restrooms, has some power. Not to say though that a park that doesn't have any of this can't still be suitable for activation, but it just might require a little bit more organization. I'll also speak to around the eligibility of parks and kind of the role that parks will be playing as applications are coming in, is we're going to review them for the suitability of a park. So we have what are called park rules, which outline certain activities that can take place that might be applicable to certain parks. So if we get an application that, for example, wants to have alcohol at it, but that park doesn't allow alcohol, we're going to reach out and let you know and see if that changes maybe where you want the location to be. Another example is inflatables. There are some parks that are not suitable for having an inflatable at. And if that is a big part of what you want to include in your event, then changing the location may be something. So while to Jessica's point, we're not voting members of this committee, we will be advising our applicants of things around eligibility depending on which park you apply. If you're open to having it at different parks, that can be included as well. And as we're just talking about parks, I'll just add this part, even though I'll probably be talking again and further in the meeting, is that one of the things that comes with having the Art in the Park Fund is getting to reserve a date before the general public has the ability to reserve it. Generally, we only take reservations starting January 1st of a calendar year. So I really encourage people to look at the eligibility list and try to narrow down where and when you want to have it. The only exception to this is that if there is an event that has been held 3 consecutive years in a park, they are able to apply for that before Art in the Park Fund and before the public. So we do have some people that have the Art in the Park Fund that are our 3-year consecutive ones. And so that would be the only potential barrier that could come up, is we might have to reach out and say, we see you've applied for a date that has a previous reservation because of that 3-year consecutive event. So please reach out if you have questions, if you are thinking about which park could be the right fit, but you're not sure. We're happy to help give you whatever information we can before you even submit the application.
Thanks, Molly. Any thoughts or questions so far around that? We're almost there, and then we'll open it up for discussion as well. I alluded to resources to help event organizers. There is this special event planning guide that goes into extensive detail on all the permits, the process. It really is a helpful tool as you try to cost out, think through your permit, how much things are going to cost. And we are here to help support you too, if you have questions. Let me get back to, so we talked expectations and support. Let's see, related documents, list of questions, how to create your Art in the Parks budget, a PDF. We'll have a video. We have budget fund templates. Oh, you can save that. And then the timeline. So noon applications are due on November 5th. We'll announce December 19th. Event date should be confirmed no later than January 1st, and programming must occur April 1st through October 31st. For DPF, looks very similar. So that's it for now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and open it up for questions, thoughts.
There was a question about the rental fee for the farmers market pavilion.
Yeah.
If you were granted, you wouldn't have to pay the full fee, is the first disclaimer on that. But I did send it to you, Colette, if you wanted to share it.
You did?
I just emailed it, or it should.
Thank
Let
you.
me see.
I'm just wondering how much we would want to put into a budget if that was where we were thinking about hosting an event.
Yeah, so the reality, Kayla, hi Kayla,
Hi.
is I know Kayla, is that we reserve some funding out of my budget to actually support that. So you wouldn't have to put any funding in for the rental fee for the farmers market
Okay.
pavilion. It's similar
Great.
to how Parks and Open Spaces waives their fee.
Perfect. Okay, well, that's easy. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Other thoughts and questions? Cool.